Hi, I'm Dan Laughlin with HyprMX, and we are at the Pocket Gamer London event, and I'm joined with Jon Bellamy from London Venture Partners. Thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. All right, so tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this industry, this kind of combination of VC and games, which is a pretty nice place to be at.
No, it's awesome. It's the best spot in the world. So my background personally is at a big studio based out of Cambridge, a studio called Jagex. They make a game called RuneScape. I think many will know who that is.
Sure.
So the studio, when I joined, they were putting together a new team, so I joined officially what was the strategy and corporate development team. My job was effectively to get the company sold. And we sold the company to a Chinese buyer in 2 tranches. That was a whirlwind, as you'd expect. I now know more Chinese bankers than I know people anywhere else in the world. So that was a crazy experience. Shortly after that, the company indirectly went public. So now Jagex is somewhat investable indirectly via the Shanghai Stock Exchange. So we did that in the first sort of 2 years of my time there. And then in the back part, it was more deal making on the buy side. About a year ago, almost exactly, I jumped ship and joined the dark side at LVP. So since then, I've been making early stage investments, which is very different, but that means that deals can be done much more quickly, a little bit more simply. So instead of things taking a year with 6 teams of bankers and auditors and everybody else, things can be done in a month or 2 with a small team of guys that are super enthusiastic and maybe a couple of funds.
Every year something new is hot, right? Blockchain, AR, whatever it is, hyper casual. How do you kind of stay on top of that, but also think, okay, these are medium, long-term investments. I'm not just trying to make $1 overnight.
Sure.
Like when you walk around this conference, like how do you keep that all in perspective?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I'd say looking at some of the fundamentals that drive, let's say, trends into the medium term and keep them alive are fairly persistent. So I would say, to give an example, when you look at the sort of RPGification or the socialification, for lack of a better term, of lots of different genres of games, they had key driving principles like the ability to bolster engagement that really made sense when appropriated to many things. I think the same is true of hyper-casual, the idea of, say, short session lengths and repeated play and fairly lean-back gameplay, idle asynchronous progression. These things are applicable and drive towards the same engagement bolstering ideas that other trends may have in the past. So it's fairly easy for me, say, to see the appropriateness of that trend and the validity of that trend. I think where that breaks down sometimes is when you have something that is perhaps less iterative and more complete step change. So for example, if we look at the way that mobile screen real estate has grown in recent years, that has enabled iterative steps and growth in certain genres and gameplay types. But then you look at, say, what's happening in VR as an example separately, rather than that being a function of progression or an iterative enabler, it's a real step change. It's completely different. And you're seeing that sort of inherent friction play out with some of the low user install base numbers. So I think the short version there is to really stick to the fundamentals and try to understand if what we're seeing as a trend is the result of better engagement metrics, better microeconomic metrics, or if it's just something that's completely out of left field, and quite often the former works better than the latter, in my opinion.
Right. So you have the benefit of seeing a lot of stuff when it's early and just kind of information. What should we be excited about for 2019, 2020 in our space?
Yeah, good question. So we spend a lot of time thinking about this. All I can do is give a personal answer here. So the things that really interest me are probably threefold. The first one is the idea of a gamified social network. That makes a lot of sense to me, and we're starting to see some examples of these popping up. Game streaming, and by game streaming I mean content streaming, not live streaming. So the sort of redundancy of dedicated hardware, shall we say. The idea that you could stream gameplay directly to a device that's fairly agnostic without the need to go out and buy a name brand console. That to me is very huge. And we made an investment in a great, unbelievably promising company called Polystream that are working on just that. And then the third one I think is games for underserved audiences. So I think it's a little known fact that almost half of all gamers are women, and just over 50% of all of the spenders in the top 10 charts in the Western world are women. And the biggest, the most high spend game in China right now, the majority of that money comes from a female demographic. And yet the number of games, proportionately speaking, that are being built specifically for that demographic is not even close to a parity. technology. So there's a commercial opportunity there that I think people are starting to recognize.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a pleasure.
Likewise.
All right.